The bruise beneath Rachel Thompson's left eye had turned the color of late autumn leaves, yellow at the edges, purple at the center, with threads of green spreading like poison through her cheekbone. She stood in the bathroom of her pristine suburban home in Scottsdale, Arizona, carefully applying concealer with the practiced precision of someone who'd become an expert at hiding truth beneath layers of expensive makeup. Outside, she could hear her husband Mark preparing for his morning run, his footsteps heavy on the marble floors, each one a reminder that she had exactly 45 minutes of peace before he returned, showered, and began another day of carefully orchestrated cruelty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Rachel Thompson's morning routine began at 5:47 a.m., 30 minutes before Mark's alarm would sound. She'd trained herself to wake at this exact time, slipping from their California king bed with movements so subtle they barely disturbed the Egyptian cotton sheets. In the beginning of their marriage, she'd loved watching him sleep, had found peace in the vulnerability of his unconscious face. Now she moved through their bedroom like a ghost, terrified that even her breathing might wake him too early and trigger the accusations that she was deliberately disrupting his sleep schedule. The house at 4821 Desert Willow Drive was everything she'd once dreamed of. 4,200 square feet of contemporary elegance with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sonoran Desert. Mark had bought it with cash 5 years ago, a celebration of his promotion to senior partner at Barren, Fitzgerald and Associates, the most prestigious law firm in Phoenix. He'd carried her across the threshold that first day, whispering promises about the children who would fill the 5 bedrooms, the dinner parties they'd host by the infinity pool, the life they'd build together in this monument to their success. Those promises had curdled into weapons he wielded with surgical precision. The master bathroom was her sanctuary for exactly 34 minutes each morning. She'd memorized Mark's routine down to the second alarm at 6 o'clock, bathroom at 6:05, running clothes at 6:10, departure at 6:15. He would run exactly 6 miles, returning at 7 o'clock, expecting his protein shake prepared and his work clothes laid out in the precise order he preferred: underwear, socks, undershirt, shirt, pants, tie, jacket. Rachel examined her face in the illuminated vanity mirror, cataloging the damage with clinical detachment. The bruise beneath her eye was 5 days old, a result of what Mark called her hysterical overreaction to the negative pregnancy test she'd hidden in the garbage. He'd found it anyway. He always found everything, and her attempt to dispose of the evidence had become proof of her deception, her failure, her fundamental inadequacy as a wife. 37 years old, he'd said, gripping her face with his manicured fingers, forcing her to look at him. 37 years old and barren as the desert outside. What exactly do you contribute to this marriage, Rachel? She hadn't answered because she'd learned that silence was sometimes safer than words, though silence could also be interpreted as defiance, depending on his mood. That night, it had been deemed disrespectful. The bruise was his lesson in proper communication. Rachel applied foundation with delicate strokes, building layers of coverage that would last through the day. She had a routine for this: 2 primer, color corrector, foundation, concealer, setting powder, setting spray. Each product had been researched extensively online during the hours when Mark was at work, ordered from different websites to avoid creating a suspicious pattern in their shared Amazon account. He monitored their credit card statements with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant, questioning any purchase that deviated from established patterns. The makeup routine took 18 minutes. She'd gotten it down from 25 through practice, earning herself precious extra moments to compose her emotional state before facing the day. Today was Thursday, which meant grocery shopping at the Whole Foods on Camelback Road, where the cashiers knew her as Mrs. Thompson and never asked about the sunglasses she wore regardless of weather. The long sleeves in Arizona heat. The way she sometimes fumbled with her credit card when her hands shook. At 6 a.m. exactly, Mark's alarm sounded. Rachel's stomach clenched with Pavlovian reliability. She heard him grunt, the sheets rustling as he reached for his phone. He would check emails first. He always checked emails first, which gave her an extra 2 minutes to ensure her appearance was above reproach. She tied her auburn hair into the low ponytail he preferred, positioned slightly to the left to hide the thin patch, where he'd grabbed a handful during last month's discussion about her failure to properly sort his dry cleaning. By the time Mark entered the bathroom, Rachel had positioned herself at the far sink, brushing her teeth with the electric toothbrush. He'd bought her for Christmas the same Christmas he'd given her a gym membership and a subscription to a meal delivery service, specializing in fertility-boosting foods. The gifts had been presented in front of his family, wrapped in silver paper with elaborate bows, everyone cooing over what a thoughtful husband he was. How lucky Rachel was to have someone who cared so much about her health. "You're up early," Mark observed, his tone neutral but watchful. "Couldn't sleep," Rachel replied carefully, spitting toothpaste with deliberate delicacy. She'd learned that too much force suggested anger, too little suggested depression. Both were unacceptable. "The Hendersons are coming for dinner Saturday," he announced, pulling his run-in shorts from the drawer she'd organized by color and fabric type. "Patricia is pregnant again, third child. Try not to make it awkward." Rachel nodded, her throat constricting around words she couldn't say. Patricia Henderson was 28, married to Mark's golf buddy, and possessed of the kind of casual fertility that seemed to mock Rachel's empty womb at every social gathering. Last time, Patricia had spent the entire evening discussing nursery decorations, while Mark's hand had gripped Rachel's thigh under the table, his fingers digging crescents into her skin through her dress. "I'll make the salmon," Rachel offered, "with the mango salsa they liked last time. Make the beef tenderloin instead. More impressive." She nodded again, calculating the grocery list modification, the additional cost that would need to be justified, the timing required for a perfect medium rare that Mark would critique regardless of execution. He left for his run at 6:15 exactly, the front door's electronic lock clicking with finality. Rachel had 45 minutes of solitude, 45 minutes when her breathing could be unmonitored, her movements unscrutinized, her existence unchallenged. She moved through the house with different purpose now, watering the orchids that Mark had declared her responsibility, checking the pool pH levels he expected her to maintain, reviewing the calendar where every appointment, every social obligation, every minute of her life was documented in his precise handwriting. The refrigerator was organized according to his system proteins on the second shelf, vegetables in the crisper, arranged by color spectrum, condiments facing forward with labels visible. She prepared his post-run shake: 1 cup unsweetened almond milk, 1 scoop vanilla protein powder, half a banana, 1 tablespoon almond butter, handful of spinach ice. Blended for exactly 45 seconds to achieve the consistency he required. At 6:55, she stood by the door with the shake in a frosted glass, a towel draped over her arm, his recovery sandals positioned at the precise angle he expected. The desert morning was already warming, promising another day of relentless sun that would bake the landscape into submission. Through the window, she could see their neighbor Mrs. Delgado walking her ancient poodle, the widow who'd once asked Rachel if everything was all right, and had never asked again after Rachel's bright, brittle assurance that everything was perfect. Mark returned at 7 o'clock, sweat darkening his gray Nike shirt, his expression evaluating her presentation. She handed him the shake, which he tasted with the concentration of a sommelier. "Too much banana," he declared. "I'll adjust it tomorrow," Rachel promised. "You said that last week." She hadn't, but correcting him would be classified as argumentative. "You're right. I apologize." He drank the shake anyway, his Adam's apple bobbing with each swallow, while Rachel stood perfectly still, waiting for dismissal or further criticism. When he headed upstairs to shower, she released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Shower would run for exactly 12 minutes. She laid out his clothes in the prescribed order, ensuring the shirt was pressed to his standards. The tie was the one he'd designated for Thursdays. The socks matched not just in color but in the degree of elastic retention. By the time he emerged, everything was perfect, arranged on the bed like evidence in one of his legal cases. "I have the Morrison deposition today," he announced, dressing with mechanical efficiency. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." Rachel knew better than to show relief at the prospect of an evening alone. "I'll leave dinner in the warming drawer. Nothing heavy. The partners are taking the team to Fleming's for lunch." She nodded, mentally adjusting the menu she'd planned, calculating how to stretch the groceries to accommodate another changed requirement without exceeding the weekly budget he'd allocated. He left at 7:45, his Audi backing out of the garage with the precise three-point turn he'd perfected. Rachel stood at the window, watching his taillights disappear down Desert Willow Drive, counting to 100 before allowing her shoulders to drop, her facade to crack, her body to acknowledge the exhaustion of perpetual performance. The house felt different when he was gone, larger, lighter, as if the walls themselves could finally exhale. She had 8 hours before his possible return, 8 hours to accomplish the tasks he expected, maintain the standards he demanded, and somehow preserve enough of herself to survive another evening of inspection and judgment. Rachel looked at the list he'd left on the counter, his handwriting sharp and angular like the words themselves could cut. Dry cleaning, Whole Foods, list attached, pool service confirmation, call mother about Sunday dinner, gym, at least 45 minutes cardio log workout, reorganize garage shelves. By size, not function. Each task was a test, each errand an opportunity for failure. The dry cleaning clerk might mention seeing her bruise, triggering questions about why she hadn't worn enough makeup. The Whole Foods trip might take too long. If she got caught in traffic, suggesting poor time management. The gym workout would be verified through the app on her phone that he monitored, checking not just duration but intensity, heart rate, calories burned. She folded the list carefully, placing it in her purse next to the concealer she carried for touch-ups, the sunglasses that hid so much, the cell phone that tracked her every movement through the location services he'd insisted on enabling for her safety. This was her life, a carefully choreographed dance of survival in a beautiful prison, each day a repetition of the last, each night a gamble on which version of Mark would walk through the door. The successful lawyer who brought flowers and spoke of vacation plans, or the disappointed husband who found fault in everything from her appearance to her breathing. Rachel Thompson, 37 years old, married for 8 years, living in a house worth $1.2 million, driving a Mercedes that Mark had chosen for its safety ratings, wearing designer clothes that hid bruises with expensive efficiency, was disappearing one day at a time. One concession at a time, one silenced scream at a time. She didn't know that in 3 hours, at the Whole Foods on Camelback Road, she would accidentally collide with a shopping cart, pushed by a man named Joseph Crowfeather, a 39-year-old Cherokee widower buying groceries for 6 children who called him Dad and still cried for the mother they'd lost to cancer 18 months ago. She didn't know that this collision would be the first crack in the perfect prison Mark had constructed around her life. The first moment when someone would look past her sunglasses and see not Mrs. Thompson, the lawyer's wife, but Rachel, a woman drowning in broad daylight while everyone around her admired the way she moved through water. All she knew was that she had 8 hours to be perfect, 8 hours to avoid mistakes, 8 hours to survive until the sound of Mark's car in the garage would signal another test of her ability to endure what her life had become. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The collision happened in aisle 7, between the organic quinoa and the gluten-free pasta. Rachel had been studying Mark's grocery list with the concentration of a student memorizing exam answers when her cart struck something solid and unmovable. The impact jolted her from her focused trance, sending her phone clattering to the polished floor, where it landed screen down with an ominous crack. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, immediately dropping to retrieve the phone, her hands shaking. As she turned it over to reveal a spider web of fractures across the screen. Mark would interrogate her about this damage, would demand to know how someone could be so careless with expensive technology, would calculate the repair cost against her demonstrated irresponsibility. "No harm done," a deep voice said above her. "Though I think your phone might disagree." Rachel looked up from her kneeling position to find a man standing beside a cart overflowing with what appeared to be enough groceries to stock a small restaurant. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders that stretched a faded denim shirt and calloused hands that spoke of physical labor. His skin held the warm bronze tone of Native American heritage. His black hair was pulled back in a simple tie, and his dark eyes held an expression of genuine concern that made Rachel instinctively step backward. "Let me help you up," he offered, extending one of those work-worn hands. "I'm fine," Rachel said quickly, standing on her own and smoothing her linen dress with nervous fingers. She noticed his cart, then truly noticed it. 6 gallons of milk, 4 loaves of bread, enough breakfast cereal to build a small fort, packages of chicken that suggested either a restaurant or an army to feed. "Joseph Crow Feather," he said, offering his hand again, this time for a shake rather than assistance. "Most people just call me Joe." Rachel hesitated. Mark had rules about speaking to strange men, about physical contact, about the appearance of impropriety that could damage his professional reputation. But the cracked phone screen was already a violation that would require explanation, and refusing a handshake would draw more attention than accepting it. "Rachel Thompson," she replied, briefly touching his palm before withdrawing her hand as if burned. "That's quite a crack," Joe observed, nodding toward her phone. "My oldest daughter Lily is genius with electronics. She fixed my screen last month after I dropped it helping my youngest son Matthew with his bike. She might be able to help if you don't want to deal with the phone store hassle." Rachel processed this information, daughter, son, multiple children, based on the grocery volume, and felt the familiar ache that accompanied any mention of family life. "That's kind, but I'll manage. I should be more careful." "Accidents happen," Joe said with a shrug that suggested he genuinely believed this. "Yesterday, my middle daughter Anna put her entire backpack through the washing machine with her homework still inside. Tuesday, my son David tried to make breakfast and somehow got pancake batter on the ceiling. Life's messy." The casual way he discussed domestic chaos was so foreign to Rachel's reality that she found herself staring. In her world, accidents were character flaws, messes were moral failings, and imperfection was unforgivable. 6 kids? She found herself asking, the question escaping before she could evaluate it for appropriateness. 6 beautiful tornadoes. Joe confirmed with a tired but genuine smile. Lily's 15, David's 13, Anna's 11. The twins Samuel and Sarah are 8, and Matthew just turned 6 last week. You have kids? The question landed like a physical blow. Rachel's hand moved involuntarily to her flat stomach, the gesture so familiar it had become unconscious. "No." Something in her tone must have conveyed more than this simple negative, because Joe's expression shifted from casual friendliness to something more perceptive. His eyes flickered to her sunglasses unnecessary in the fluorescent grocery store lighting, then to the careful way she held herself, as if occupying space was something that required permission. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to pry." "You weren't," Rachel replied, forcing brightness into her voice. "I should finish shopping. My husband expects." She caught herself. I have a schedule to keep." She began to move past him, but Joe's cart was angled in a way that blocked easy passage. As she maneuvered around it, her sleeve caught on a protruding box of pasta, pulling the fabric up just enough to reveal the distinctive finger-shaped bruises on her upper arm, purple-green marks that matched the grip of someone who'd grabbed her 4 days ago during a discussion about her failure to record his favorite television program. Joe's intake of breath was sharp enough that Rachel heard it. She yanked her sleeve down, her face burning beneath the unnecessary sunglasses, waiting for the questions or worse, the judgment. Mark always said that private business should stay private, that airing marital disputes was a betrayal of trust that reflected poorly on both parties. But Joe didn't ask questions. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a small white business card, placing it carefully on top of her purse in the cart's child seat. "I run a landscaping business," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Desert Bloom Gardens. We also do property maintenance, household repairs, that kind of thing. In case you ever need anything fixed." The double meaning wasn't lost on Rachel. She stared at the card without touching it, her mind racing through the implications of accepting it, the consequences if Mark found it, the suggestion that she might need help with something that couldn't be repaired with tools and labor. "I have to go," she whispered. "The card has my cell number," Joe continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Available 24/7 for emergencies. Garden emergencies, of course." Rachel grabbed the card and shoved it deep into her purse, beneath the makeup and receipts, and the accumulated detritus of a life lived under surveillance. She pushed her cart past Joe without another word, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the grocery store's music. She finished shopping in a haze, grabbing items from Mark's list without her usual careful price comparison, without checking expiration dates, without the meticulous attention that might earn his approval. At checkout, she fumbled with her credit card, aware that Joe was 3 lanes over, loading his massive grocery haul onto the conveyor belt while chatting with the teenaged cashier about school starting next week. In the parking lot, Rachel loaded her groceries with mechanical precision, each bag placed in the trunk according to Mark's system, refrigerated items in the insulated bags he'd bought, pantry staples in the reusable totes, cleaning supplies separate from food items. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly, making the blacktop shimmer with heat waves that distorted the distant mountains. She was closing the trunk when she heard a voice behind her. "Mrs. Thompson?" Rachel spun around to find a woman she vaguely recognized from the gym, one of the morning yoga class regulars who always seemed to be watching her with unusual interest. The woman was probably mid-40s, with graying hair and a practical ponytail, and the kind of direct gaze that suggested professional assessment. "I'm Barbara Lawson," the woman said. "We've never officially met, but I've seen you at the gym. I wanted to give you this." She held out a small purple brochure, the kind Rachel had seen in medical offices and community centers, carefully designed to be non-threatening. The title read, "You Are Not Alone," in gentle script. "I don't," Rachel began, but Barbara had already placed the brochure on the trunk of Rachel's Mercedes. "I'm a counselor at New Beginnings," Barbara said quietly. "We help women in difficult situations. Everything is confidential. That number is answered 24 hours a day." "You're mistaken," Rachel said, her voice high and thin. "I don't need my husband as a respected attorney. We're very happy." Barbara nodded as if she'd heard this exact response countless times. "Of course. But sometimes respected attorneys have wives who need someone to talk to about anything. Garden emergencies, as someone recently told me. Amazing how gardens can become emergencies at odd hours." Rachel's eyes widened. Had Joe Crowfeather somehow orchestrated this second encounter? But Barbara was already walking away, leaving the purple brochure on the trunk where anyone could see it, evidence of Rachel's perceived need for help that Mark would interpret as betrayal. She grabbed the brochure and stuffed it into her purse. With Joe's business card, these two pieces of paper feeling like bombs that might detonate her carefully controlled existence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark, "Meeting running late. Don't wait up. Better not have forgotten the almond flour." She hadn't forgotten. She never forgot anything on his lists, had trained herself to be perfect in the execution of his requirements. But perfection hadn't made him love her more, hadn't softened his disappointments, hadn't prevented the bruises that she covered with expensive concealer and designer clothing. During the drive home, Rachel found herself thinking about Joe's description of his chaotic household: pancake batter on the ceiling, backpacks in washing machines, 6 children creating beautiful disasters that he discussed with fond exasperation rather than rage. She tried to imagine Mark's reaction to pancake batter on their pristine kitchen ceiling, the volcanic eruption that would follow such a transgression. At a red light, she pulled out Joe's business card. Desert Bloom Gardens was printed in simple green text with a small logo of a cactus flower. Below his name was the tagline, "Helping beautiful things grow in difficult conditions." The metaphor was so obvious, it might have been funny if Rachel had remembered how to laugh at anything beyond. The bitter irony of her situation. The light turned green, but Rachel remained stationary until the car behind her honked. She shoved the card back into her purse and drove home to the house that had become her gilded cage, where she would put away groceries according to Mark's system, prepare a dinner he might or might not eat, and wait for the sound of his car. That would determine whether tonight would bring criticism or something worse. But something had shifted in those few minutes in the grocery store. 2 strangers had seen through her careful facade, had offered help she couldn't accept but couldn't forget. The cards in her purse felt like keys to doors she wasn't brave enough to open, but their mere existence suggested that doors existed, that her prison might not be as escape-proof as Mark had convinced her to believe. That evening, while Mark was still at his extended meeting, Rachel stood in their bedroom closet, a space larger than most people's bedrooms, filled with clothes he'd chosen, shoes he'd approved, jewelry he'd selected to mark anniversaries of a marriage that had become her slow dissolution. She reached behind a row of designer handbags to a small coach clutch she hadn't used in years, a gift from her sister before the wedding, before Mark had systematically eliminated relationships that might challenge his control. She placed Joe's business card and Barbara's brochure inside the clutch, zipping them into the inner pocket where they would be safe from Mark's periodic inspections. It was the first secret she'd successfully kept from him in years, the first act of rebellion that hadn't been immediately discovered and punished. Rachel didn't know that Joe Crowfeather had indeed mentioned their encounter to Barbara Lawson. Not from some orchestrated plan, but during their kids' soccer practice where Barbara's daughter played on the same team as Joe's daughter Anna. She didn't know that Barbara had been watching her at the gym for months, recognizing the careful movements of someone hiding injuries, the hypervigilance of someone living in fear. She didn't know that in 2 weeks, Mark's escalating violence would leave her with injuries that makeup couldn't hide, that she would finally call the number on Joe's business card at 2 a.m., whispering for help while Mark slept off his rage in their California king bed. All she knew was that 2 strangers had seen her, really seen her, and offered alternatives to the story Mark had written for her life. For tonight, that knowledge was enough to help her sleep, the hidden cards in her closet like talismans, against the despair that threatened to drown her completely. The first time Rachel called the number on Joe's business card, she hung up before it connected. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after Mark had discovered she'd forgotten to transfer money to their joint investment account, a task she'd never been asked to do before but should have intuited from his previous financial discussions. The punishment had been calculated, not physical this time, but the methodical destruction of her grandmother's china tea set, piece by piece, while explaining how material possessions were replaceable, but trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. She sat in her car outside a Starbucks on Scottsdale Road, far enough from home to avoid anyone Mark might know, staring at her phone screen where Joe's number waited in the recent calls list. Her finger hovered over the green call button, while her rational mind screamed warnings about the consequences of seeking help from a stranger, especially a man. Mark had contacts throughout Phoenix's legal system. He golfed with judges, had prosecutors as clients, knew police officers by name. The second attempt made it through 2 rings before she ended the call, her heart hammering against her ribs, as if she'd committed a crime rather than attempted a phone conversation. She ordered a coffee she didn't want, needing the normalcy of a mundane transaction to steady her nerves. The third time, Joe answered on the first ring. Desert Bloom Gardens, Joe speaking. His voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, steady, undemanding. Rachel opened her mouth, but no words emerged, her carefully rehearsed explanation evaporating like morning dew in the desert sun. "Hello?" Joe said, then more gently, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Something about that simple assurance broke through her paralysis. "It's Rachel Thompson, from the grocery store." "Mrs. Thompson." His tone shifted, becoming somehow both warmer and more careful. "I'm glad you called. How can I help you?" She stopped, started again. "My husband is particular about the yard, the landscaping. He's noticed some issues with the irrigation system." It was a lie wrapped in truth. Mark had complained about brown patches in the lawn, had blamed her for not monitoring the gardener properly, but he hadn't authorized any repairs. "I can take a look," Joe said easily, as if women called him with coded requests for help every day. "When would be convenient?" "He's in court Thursday morning. 9 to noon. Thursday at 9:30 works perfectly." "Should I bring an invoice for the consultation?" Sometimes having paperwork helps explain things. The subtext was clear. He understood. She needed documentation to justify his presence. "Yes, please. Make it look professional." "Everything I do is professional, Mrs. Thompson. I'll see you Thursday." Thursday arrived with monsoon clouds building over the mountains, unusual for early August but not unprecedented. Rachel had changed clothes 3 times, settling on jeans and a long-sleeved cotton shirt that looked casual, but covered the fingerprint bruises on her forearms from Sunday's argument about her failure to laugh convincingly enough at his partner's joke during dinner. Joe's truck pulled into the driveway at exactly 9:30, a Ford F-250, with Desert Bloom Gardens stenciled on the sides and Arizona plates dusty from job sites. He emerged wearing work clothes and carrying a professional clipboard, every inch the landscaping contractor he claimed to be. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," he called out, loud enough for any listening neighbors to hear. "Let's take a look at those irrigation issues." Rachel led him to the backyard, maintaining appropriate distance, aware that Mrs. Delgado was probably watching from her kitchen window. The yard was Mark's pride, a half-acre of manicured perfection with a negative-edge pool, outdoor kitchen, and desert landscaping that cost more to maintain than most people's mortgage. Once they were away from potential observation, Joe's professional demeanor softened. "You okay?" "I don't know why I called," Rachel said quickly. "This was a mistake. My husband is in court until noon. We have time." Joe set down his clipboard and turned to face her fully. "Mrs. Thompson, Rachel, I need you to know something. My wife Emily died 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye." Rachel blinked at the unexpected revelation, unsure how to respond to grief that had nothing to do with her situation. "I'm telling you this," Joe continued, "because for 6 months I watched the strongest woman I knew become someone who needed help with everything. Emily hated needing help, fought it every step. But eventually, she learned that accepting support wasn't weakness. It was survival." "That's different," Rachel said. "She was sick. Just what?" The words Mark used echoed in her mind. Pathetic, useless, barren, worthless. Stupid. I'm stupid for letting it get this bad. Joe's expression darkened. Who told you that? It doesn't matter. It does, actually. But we'll come back to that. He picked up his clipboard, clicking his pen. For now, let's actually look at your irrigation system. I wasn't lying about being a landscaper. If your husband checks, I need to have legitimate observations about your yard. Plus, you really do have some coverage issues near the eucalyptus trees. They walked the property together, Joe making genuine notes about sprinkler heads and drainage. Problems while Rachel found herself talking carefully at first, then with increasing honesty about her situation. She didn't mention Mark's name beyond calling him my husband, didn't specify the nature of the violence beyond difficulties, but Joe seemed to understand the magnitude of what she wasn't saying. The twins started kindergarten this week. Joe mentioned as he tested water pressure at a valve box. Sarah cried for 10 minutes at drop-off. Samuel marched in like he owned the place. Same womb, same parents, completely different reactions to identical situations. Must be challenging, raising 6 kids alone. Chaos, Joe admitted. Beautiful chaos. Emily's mother helps when she can, but she's got her own health issues. My sister drives down from Flagstaff once a month. Mostly it's just me trying to remember. Who needs to be where, when homework's due, whose turn it is to choose Friday movie night. How do you manage it all? Joe straightened from examining a sprinkler head, his expression thoughtful. Badly most days. But here's what Emily taught. Me perfect is the enemy of good enough. My kids don't need a perfect parent. They need a present one. They need to know they're loved, they're safe, and tomorrow will come no matter how badly today goes. Rachel felt tears building behind her sunglasses. When was the last time she'd felt safe? When had tomorrow become something to dread rather than anticipate? Your husband, Joe said carefully. Does he know you're unhappy? The question was so absurd Rachel actually laughed a sharp, bitter sound that surprised them both. He counts on it. My unhappiness is proof that I'm failing as a wife. Happy wives don't have bruises to cover. Happy wives get pregnant. Happy wives don't flinch when their husbands come home. Joe set down his clipboard completely, turning to face her with an intensity that would have frightened her from anyone else. Rachel, what you're describing isn't a marriage, it's captivity. You don't understand. Mark he's powerful, connected, he knows everyone. If you tried to leave, you'd have help. More than you realize. From who? You? A widowed landscaper with 6 kids who doesn't even know me. From someone who recognizes what fear looks like, Joe said quietly. From someone who's watched people disappear piece by piece until there's nothing left but compliance. From someone who believes you deserve better than survival. Thunder rumbled across the valley, the monsoon clouds delivering on their promise. The first fat raindrops began falling, sending up puffs of dust from the dry ground. We should go inside, Rachel said, but she didn't move. Or we could stand in the rain, Joe suggested. When's the last time you stood in the rain without worrying about your hair, your clothes, someone's reaction? I can't remember. Then maybe it's time to remember. The rain intensified, going from scattered drops to a steady downpour in seconds, the way desert storms did. Joe spread his arms wide, tilting his face to the sky, letting the water soak through his work clothes. After a moment's hesitation, Rachel pulled off her sunglasses and did the same. The rain was warmer than she expected, carrying the smell of creosote and wet earth. It plastered her carefully styled hair to her head, made her makeup run in rivers down her cheeks, soaked through her clothes until she was thoroughly, completely, gloriously drenched. She laughed, really laughed for the first time in years. Not the polite social laugh she performed at Mark's business dinners. Not the nervous laugh that tried to deflect his anger, but genuine, uncontrolled laughter that came from somewhere deep in her chest and refused to be contained. Joe laughed. 2, and they stood there in Rachel's perfectly manicured backyard. 2 damaged adults letting the rain wash away pretense and performance, if only for a moment. "I have to change before he gets home," Rachel said finally, reality creeping back as the storm began to pass. "He'll want to know why I was outside in the rain. Tell him the landscaper was showing you irrigation issues when the storm hit." Joe suggested, not a lie. He retrieved his clipboard, now spotted with water damage, and made a show of writing up an estimate. "I'm recommending a full system evaluation, replacement of 6 sprinkler heads, and adjustment to the timer system. It'll take multiple visits to complete," Rachel understood. He was creating legitimate reasons to return, to check on her, to maintain contact that could be explained if questioned. "My oldest daughter Lily wants to start a tutoring business," Joe mentioned as they walked toward his truck. "She's brilliant at math and science, looking for students. In case you know anyone who might benefit from academic support." Another lifeline disguised as casual conversation. Rachel memorized the information, filing it away with all the other small rebellions she was accumulating. As Joe prepared to leave, he handed her the official estimate on Desert Bloom Gardens letterhead. At the bottom, in small print beneath the terms and conditions, he'd written a series of numbers that looked like a reference code, but was actually a phone number, Barbara Lawson's direct line at New Beginnings. "That's for warranty inquiries," he said formally, aware they were back in view of neighbors. "Any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to call." After his truck disappeared down Desert Willow Drive, Rachel stood in her foyer, dripping onto the fire marble floor Mark had selected for its impressiveness rather than its practicality. She caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror, makeup smeared, hair destroyed, clothes clinging to her body, and for once, she didn't immediately rush to repair the damage. Instead, she stood there looking at this waterlogged version of herself and saw something she hadn't seen in years: a woman who had laughed in the rain, who had stood in her backyard and felt joy instead of fear, who had spent 2 hours with a kind man who asked nothing of her except that she consider the possibility of deserving better. When Mark came home that night, the storm had passed, her appearance was restored to his specifications, and dinner was waiting in the warming drawer as always. He didn't notice the business card now hidden with the others in her secret clutch. He didn't detect any change in her demeanor. He didn't realize that something fundamental had shifted in the space between morning and evening, but Rachel knew. She'd stood in the rain and remembered what it felt like to be human. It was a small step, barely noticeable to anyone watching, but it was movement in a life that had become dangerously static. And movement, she was learning, was the first requirement for escape. The tutoring arrangement began as another carefully constructed lie. Rachel told Mark she'd joined a book club that met Tuesday afternoons at the Paradise Valley Library, a respectable activity for a lawyer's wife, something that suggested intellectual engagement without threatening independence. In reality, she drove to a small coffee shop called Sacred Grounds on the Salt River Reservation, where Joe's 15-year-old daughter, Lily, waited with algebra textbooks she didn't need and wisdom beyond her years. Lily Crow Feather looked nothing like her father. Where Joe was broad and solid, Lily was delicate, with her late mother's fine features and observant eyes that seemed to catalog everything. She wore her school uniform from Phoenix Preparatory Academy, the prestigious charter school where she maintained a 4.0 GPA, while essentially raising 5 younger siblings. "Dad said you might need help with some educational stuff," Lily announced. At their first meeting, sliding into the booth across from Rachel with a coffee that contained enough sugar to constitute a dessert. "But we both know that's not why you're here." Rachel's carefully prepared cover story evaporated. "Your father told you about me? Dad doesn't tell me anything. He thinks I'm still 8 years old and believes in fairy tales." Lily pulled out a battered notebook covered in band stickers and mathematical equations. "But I have eyes. I saw." The bruises you tried to hide at the grocery store. I know what concealer looks like when it's covering more than dark circles. My friend Megan's mom went through the same thing. I don't know what you think you saw, Mrs. Thompson. Lily's voice carried an authority that belonged to someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast. Can I tell you something about my mom? Rachel nodded, struck by this teenager's directness. Mom was diagnosed with cancer when Matthew was 4. The doctors gave her a year. She made it 80 months through pure stubbornness and the fact that she refused to leave us until she'd prepared us for life without her. Lily's fingers traced the equations on her notebook cover. One of the last things she told me was that women need to protect each other. That we see things men miss, understand pain that doesn't leave visible marks. Your mother sounds remarkable. She was. But she was also human. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, nights she cried when she thought we were asleep, moments when the fear was bigger than her faith. She taught me that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about choosing to keep going even when you're already broken. Rachel felt tears threatening. This child, because despite her maturity, Lily was still a child, was describing a philosophy Rachel had forgotten existed. Why are you helping me? Lily smiled, and for the first time, Rachel could see Joe in her expression. Because Dad comes home from checking on your irrigation system looking hopeful. Because my little sisters need to see that their father can care about someone again. Because you remind me of a bird that's forgotten, it has wings. Over the following weeks, their Tuesday meetings became Rachel's anchor point. Lily would order her sugar-laden coffee, Rachel would drink tea, and they would talk about everything except what really mattered until suddenly they were talking about nothing else. Matthew wet the bed again last night, Lily mentioned during their third meeting. It happens when he dreams about Mom. Dad pretends not to notice, just changes the sheets without making a big deal. Your father seems to handle everything with grace. He falls apart in private, Lily said matter-of-factly. I've caught him crying in his truck after he thinks we're asleep. He keeps Mom's coffee mug on his nightstand, won't let anyone wash it. Still sets 7 plates for dinner sometimes before remembering. Grief is complicated, so is abuse. Lily's directness was surgical. How long has your husband been hurting you? Rachel's automatic denial died on her lips. It wasn't always like this. When we met, Mark was charming, attentive. He brought me flowers every Friday, remembered how I took my coffee, defended me to his mother, who thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. When did it change? Gradually, so slowly I didn't notice until I was drowning. First it was comments about my appearance, helpful suggestions about losing weight, dressing more professionally. Then criticism of my friends, my family, the way I laughed too loudly or smiled too much at waiters. By the time he hit me the first time, I'd already accepted that I deserved it. Lily reached across the table and took Rachel's hand. Her fingers were ink-stained from homework, nails bitten short, a teenager's hand that shouldn't have to comfort a grown woman's trauma. My mom used to say that abusers are like boiling water. They don't start hot. They warm up so gradually, you don't realize you're being cooked until it's too late to jump out of the pot. Your mother was wise. She was a survivor too. Different kind of battle, but she understood what it meant to fight for your life. Lily squeezed Rachel's hand. The question is, when are you going to start fighting for yours? That afternoon, when Rachel returned home, she found Mark's car already in the garage 3 hours earlier than expected. Her stomach clenched with familiar dread as she entered through the kitchen door, trying to project casual confidence rather than the fear coursing through her veins. Mark stood in the living room holding her phone, the one with the cracked screen. She'd been hiding under makeup in her purse. Interesting text message, he said, his voice dangerously calm. From someone named Lily. Hope you enjoyed coffee today. Same time next week? Want to explain why you're having coffee with someone when you're supposed to be at book club? Rachel's mind raced through possible explanations, each one more inadequate than the last. She's a teenager I met at the library. She's interested in the books we're reading. A teenager. Mark stepped closer, and Rachel involuntarily backed against the wall. You're having secret coffee dates with a teenager. Either you're lying about the book club, or you're inappropriate with minors. Which would you prefer, I believe? It's not like that. She's Joe Crowfeather's daughter. Mark held up her phone, showing a Google search he'd conducted. Desert Bloom Gardens. The landscaper who's been here twice in 2 weeks for irrigation issues that our regular service somehow missed. His teenage daughter who happens to attend Phoenix Prep on a scholarship. Want to revise your story? Rachel felt the walls closing in, the careful construction of half-truths and misdirection collapsing. You're having me followed? I'm protecting my reputation. A partner at Brennan, Fitzgerald and Associates, can't have a wife sneaking around with landscapers and their children. What would people think? That I have friends? The slap came fast, snapping her head sideways, leaving her ear ringing and her cheek burning. But something was different this time. Instead of apologizing, instead of trying to soothe his anger, Rachel straightened and looked him directly in the eyes. You hit me. You lied to me. You hit me, she repeated, louder this time, as if saying it enough might make it real, undeniable, unforgivable. Mark grabbed her shoulders, shaking her hard enough to rattle her teeth. You will end whatever. This is with that landscaper and his daughter. You will attend your actual book club where Margaret Henderson can verify your presence. You will remember that everything you have, everything you are, exists because I allow it. And if I don't? The question hung between them like a lit fuse. Mark's expression shifted from anger to something colder, more calculated. Then I'll file for divorce on grounds of infidelity. I'll make sure everyone knows you were having an inappropriate relationship with a Native American laborer. I'll destroy his business with health code violations and zoning complaints. I'll call Phoenix Prep and suggest they investigate why their scholarship student is meeting secretly with married women. Would you like to be responsible for ruining a 15-year-old girl's future? Rachel saw the trap closing, not just around her but around Joe and Lily, innocent people whose kindness had made them targets. This was Mark's specialty, the legal maneuvering that turned victims into aggressors, that weaponized the system against anyone who challenged his control. I'll stop seeing them, she whispered. Good. And to ensure you remember this lesson, you'll be volunteering at the church starting tomorrow. Every day, 9 to 3, where Pastor Kenneth can keep an eye on you and report back to me. Community service looks good for the firm's image. That night, Rachel lay in bed beside Mark, listening to his satisfied breathing, feeling the weight of her new prison. But she kept thinking about Lily's words, about boiling water and fighting for life, about birds who'd forgotten they had wings. At 2 a.m., she slipped out of bed and into the bathroom, where she examined her face in the mirror. The slap had left a mark that would bruise by morning, another injury to hide beneath makeup and lies. But this time, she didn't whisper about being broken. Instead, she pulled out her phone and took a photograph, evidence, proof, documentation. That this had happened, that she hadn't imagined or deserved it. She thought about Lily, probably awake doing homework or preparing school lunches for her siblings. A 15-year-old carrying the weight of motherless children, while still maintaining perfect grades and finding time to offer wisdom to broken women in coffee shops. If a teenager could be that strong, that resilient, that determined to protect others while processing her own grief, then maybe Rachel could find the courage to protect herself. She opened her phone's notes app and began typing. August 15th, 2024. Mark hit me for meeting with Lily Crowfeather. Threatened to destroy her father's business and her education if I continue contact. This is the 47th time he struck me. I'm starting to document everything. It was a small act of rebellion, invisible to Mark's surveillance, but it was the beginning of something. Rachel thought about Emily Crow Feather, dying of cancer but determined to prepare her children for life without her. She thought about Lily, honoring her mother's memory by protecting other women. She thought about Joe, standing in the rain and laughing despite carrying the weight of widowhood and single parenthood. All of them were broken in different ways. All of them had chosen to keep living, keep helping, keep believing that tomorrow could be different from today. Rachel wasn't ready to leave yet, wasn't strong enough to risk Mark's threats against the Crow Feather family, but she was ready to start preparing. In the darkness of the bathroom, lit only by her phone screen, Rachel began planning her own survival, inspired by a 15-year-old girl who understood that strength wasn't about being unbreakable, it was about choosing to keep going even when you're already broken. The church volunteer position Mark had intended as punishment became Rachel's unexpected sanctuary. St. Augustine's Community Center operated from a building adjacent to the main church, serving Phoenix's homeless population with meals, medical care, and social services. Pastor Kenneth, who Mark expected to be his surveillance system, turned out to be a 70-year-old former Marine who'd seen enough of the world to recognize suffering in all its disguises. "You're Mark Thompson's wife," Pastor Kenneth said on her first morning, his tone neutral as he handed her a volunteer apron. "He called to explain you'd be helping us out of a desire for spiritual growth." "That's right," Rachel replied, tying the apron over her designer blouse, an absurd combination that made her feel like she was playing dress-up. "Funny thing about spiritual growth," Pastor Kenneth mused, leading her to the kitchen where industrial-sized pots simmered with soup. "It tends to happen when we're helping others, not when we're being punished. But I suppose Mr. Thompson knows that, being such a dedicated Christian who hasn't attended service in the 3 years I've been here." Rachel looked up sharply, meeting the pastor's knowing eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, Rachel, you'll be working with Sister Catherine in the women's shelter wing. She needs help with intake paperwork and organizing donations. Sister Catherine has a particular gift for helping women in difficult situations. I think you'll find her company educational." Sister Catherine turned out to be nothing like Rachel expected. Instead of an elderly nun in traditional habit, she was a 45-year-old former prosecutor who'd left law to join religious service after winning a case she knew had put an innocent person in prison. "Guilt's a powerful motivator," Sister Catherine explained as she showed Rachel the filing system. "I spent 15 years using the law as a weapon, believing conviction rates equaled justice. Then I met the family of a man I'd sent to death. DNA evidence proved his innocence 2 weeks after his execution. That's horrific. That's the system your husband operates in daily." Sister Catherine's directness was startling. "Mark Thompson has a reputation among those of us who work with vulnerable populations. 3 of his clients have had restraining orders filed by ex-wives. Interesting pattern for someone who specializes in corporate law." Rachel felt her chest tighten. I know patterns. I recognize the way you hold yourself. The careful makeup, the long sleeves in August heat. I also know that when you're ready, there are resources available that even Mark Thompson can't manipulate." Over the following weeks, Rachel discovered capabilities she'd forgotten she possessed. Her teaching degree, dormant for 8 years of marriage, proved invaluable in creating educational materials for the shelter's children. Her organizational skills, honed by Mark's demanding standards, transformed the donation room from chaos into an efficient system that doubled their capacity to help families. "You're a natural at this," observed Donna Washington, a 60-year-old black woman who'd lived at the shelter for 3 months after escaping her own abusive marriage. "You see what people need before they ask." Rachel was helping Donna fill out job applications, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed resume formatting. "It's just basic observation. No, honey, it's empathy. You recognize pain because you're swimming in it. Question is, when you gonna stop treading water and start swimming toward shore? The question haunted Rachel as she drove home each afternoon. Returning to the house on Desert Willow Drive, where Mark waited with his critiques and cruelties. But something was changing. The women at the shelter had started looking to her for guidance, for help with everything from legal documents to childcare. Strategies. She was becoming competent again, valuable in ways that had nothing to do with being Mark Thompson's wife. One Tuesday, 6 weeks into her volunteer service, Rachel was processing intake paperwork when a familiar name appeared on the form. Anna. Crow Feather, age 11, requesting after-school tutoring assistance. I know this child, Rachel said to Sister Catherine, her heart racing. Joe's daughter. He called asking if we could help. Said he knew someone here who'd be perfect for the job. Sister Catherine's expression was carefully neutral. The family qualifies for our services. Single parent, 6 children, limited income despite running his own business. Rachel stared at the form, understanding the message Joe had sent through official channels that Mark couldn't challenge. The church's tutoring program was legitimate, documented, supervised. Even Mark couldn't object to her helping a child in need through proper religious charity. Anna arrived that afternoon, a smaller version of Lily with the same observant eyes, but a shyer demeanor. She carried a backpack held together with duct tape and a math textbook that had seen better decades. Miss Rachel. Anna's face lit up with recognition. Dad said you might be here. Lily talks about you all the time. She says you're learning to be brave. Still learning, Rachel admitted, leading Anna to the quiet study room. How's your family? Chaos, Anna said cheerfully, echoing her father's description. Matthew tried to cook eggs this morning and somehow got them on the ceiling. Dad just laughed and said we're starting a new tradition of ceiling food. Sarah lost a tooth and put it under her pillow, but the tooth fairy forgot to come because Dad fell asleep helping David with his science project. Rachel felt a pang of longing for this messy, imperfect, loving household. Sounds eventful. Dad's tired all the time, Anna confided, opening her math book. He pretends he's not, but I heard him talking to Mom's picture last night. He said he doesn't know how she made it look so easy, keeping us all together. He said he met someone who reminds him of her strength, but he can't. Anna stopped, blushing. I shouldn't have been listening. Rachel's hands trembled as she helped Anna with fractions, her mind spinning with the implications of Joe's overheard confession. He saw strength in her, not the broken woman Mark had created, but someone capable of resilience. They worked together for an hour, Anna proving to be quick-minded, but easily distracted, needing constant redirection and encouragement. Rachel found herself slipping into teaching mode, using techniques she'd developed years ago for students with attention challenges. You're really good at this, Anna observed. Were you a teacher before? A long time ago. Why did you stop? Rachel considered her answer carefully. Sometimes life takes us in directions we don't expect. But maybe that's just preparation for finding our way back to where we belong. When Joe arrived to pick up Anna, Rachel was waiting in the lobby. Knowing Mark would review the security footage, but unable to resist the chance for connection. Mr. Crow Feather, she said formally. Anna did excellent work today. She's welcome in the tutoring program every Tuesday and Thursday. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. His eyes held questions he couldn't ask in this surveilled space. I appreciate you taking time for her. Dad, Miss Rachel taught me a trick for remembering fraction operations. Anna interjected, bouncing with excitement. And she said I could bring my stories next time for English help. Stories? Rachel asked. Anna writes fantasy adventures, Joe explained, pride evident in his voice. Creates whole worlds with magical systems and complex characters. Emily always sighed. He stopped, swallowing hard. Emily encouraged her creativity. I'd be honored to read them, Rachel said, meaning it completely. As they prepared to leave, Anna suddenly hugged Rachel. a spontaneous gesture that violated all of Mark's rules about appropriate physical contact. Rachel stiffened, then slowly relaxed into the embrace, feeling the simple warmth of a child's affection. "Thank you for helping me," Anna whispered. "Lily says you need help too. Maybe we can help each other." After they left, Rachel stood in the lobby feeling something shift inside her chest. These children, Lily with her premature wisdom, Anna with her creative spirit, were offering her something Mark had systematically destroyed: the belief that she had value beyond her failures, strength beyond her submission. Sister Catherine appeared beside her. "The Crow Feather family seems to have adopted you. It's just tutoring." "Rachel, I've been doing this work for 5 years. I've seen hundreds of women in your situation. Most never make it out because they can't imagine life beyond their current reality. But you're building a new reality piece by piece. The volunteer work, the connections you're making, the skills you're remembering. You're preparing for something, even if you don't realize it yet." That evening, Mark reviewed her day with his usual interrogation, but Rachel had answers for everything. Yes, she'd helped a child with homework through the official church program. Yes, the child's father had picked her up with Sister Catherine present. Yes, she'd hugged the child as appropriate Christian charity. "You seem different," Mark observed over dinner, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "I'm finding purpose in helping others," Rachel replied, using language she knew he couldn't challenge. "The church work is fulfilling. You were right to arrange it." Mark's expression shifted, caught between suspicion and satisfaction that his punishment had seemingly achieved its goal of keeping her occupied and monitored. "Pastor Kenneth speaks highly of your work," he admitted. "Says you've reorganized their entire donation system. I enjoy being useful. Don't get too attached. Once I'm confident you've learned your lesson about inappropriate friendships, you'll stop this volunteer nonsense." Rachel nodded obediently while internally cataloging another piece of evidence: Mark's need to control even her charitable works, to weaponize kindness into punishment, to ensure that any competence she developed remained under his authority. But he'd miscalculated. The church had become her classroom, the shelter residents her teachers, the crow-feathered children her reminder that love could exist without conditions or cruelty. She was becoming competent not just at tasks but at subterfuge, building a network of support that existed within the very system Mark had designed to contain her. That night, she added another entry to her hidden documentation. September 10th, 2024. Tutored Anna Crow Feather through approved church program. Mark admitted the punishment has become valuable to his image, beginning to establish pattern of independent capability. Sister Catherine has offered resources when ready. I'm not ready yet, but I'm getting stronger. Rachel Thompson was rising from the ashes of the woman Mark had tried to destroy, developing competencies that had nothing to do with being a perfect wife and everything to do with remembering who she'd been before fear became her primary emotion. The teacher was returning, one lesson at a time, one child at a time, one small victory at a time. The crisis began with a positive pregnancy test. Rachel stared at the 2 pink lines on the morning of September 28th, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped the test into the toilet. After 4 years of trying, dozens of negative tests, 3 rounds of failed IVF that Mark had blamed on her hostile womb, she was finally pregnant. Her first emotion wasn't joy, it was terror. She knew Mark would see this as vindication, proof that the problem had always been her stress, her inability to relax, her fundamental failures as a woman. He would use this pregnancy to tighten his control, to justify increased surveillance for the baby's safety, to eliminate any remaining independence she'd carved out through her church work. Rachel hid the test in the trash, wrapping it in toilet paper and tucking it beneath other refuse. She needed time to think, to plan, to decide whether this miracle was actually a trap that would imprison her forever. At the church that morning, Sister Catherine noticed immediately. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she observed. pulling Rachel into her private office. "I'm pregnant," Rachel whispered, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Sister Catherine's expression cycled through surprise, concern, and understanding. "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified. He's going to use this baby to control me completely. I'll never be able to leave. He'll fight for custody, use his connections to paint me as unstable, take the child just to hurt me." Rachel's voice broke. "I've wanted a baby for so long, but not like this. Not as his prisoner. Rachel, sit down, breathe." Sister Catherine poured water from a pitcher on her desk. "You have options. You have time. How far along?" "Maybe 6 weeks based on my last period, so you have time to make decisions, to plan, to get safe if that's what you choose." "Safe?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "There's no safe with Mark. You don't understand the reach he has. Actually, I do." Sister Catherine opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been documenting every injury you've come in with, every story from women at the shelter about Mark's clients, every piece of evidence that establishes a pattern. If you decide to leave, you won't be doing it empty-handed." Rachel stared at the folder, overwhelmed by this revelation of quiet preparation on her behalf. Before she could respond, Donna Washington burst through the door. "Sister, we have an emergency. There's a family in the lobby, single father, 6 kids. The oldest girl is having some kind of breakdown." Rachel's blood ran cold. "The crow feathers?" She rushed to the lobby to find Joe kneeling beside Lily, who was curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing with an intensity that suggested complete emotional collapse. The other 5 children stood in a protective circle, Matthew clinging to Joe's leg, the twins holding hands, David and Anna trying to comfort their older sister. "She won't tell me what happened," Joe said desperately when he saw Rachel. "She came home from school like this. I didn't know where else to go." Rachel knelt beside Lily, recognizing the posture of someone trying to make themselves disappear. "Lily, it's Rachel. You're safe. Can you hear me?" Lily's sobs intensified, but she managed to uncurl enough to reveal her face and the purple bruise spreading across her left cheek. "Who did this?" Joe's voice was deadly quiet. "Brandon Morrison," David answered when Lily couldn't. "He's been harassing her since school started. Today she rejected him in front of his friends, so he cornered her after school." Rachel felt rage coursing through her veins, not the helpless anger she felt about her own situation, but protective fury for this brilliant girl who'd shown her such kindness. "Did he?" Joe couldn't finish the question. "No," Lily managed to whisper. "Teachers came. But he said he knows where we live. Said foster kids and motherless trash should know their place." "I'm calling the police," Joe said, pulling out his phone. "No," Lily grabbed his arm. "His father is Richard Morrison, the developer. They own half of Phoenix. They'll destroy us, Dad, just like—" She looked at Rachel meaningfully, remembering their conversations about powerful men who weaponized systems. Rachel understood the trap perfectly. Brandon Morrison was Mark Thompson's younger iteration, entitled Protected, consequences sliding off him like water while his victims bore permanent marks. "There's another way," Rachel heard herself saying. "Give me your phone, Joe." She found the contact she'd saved weeks ago but never used. Barbara Lawson from New Beginnings, the counselor who'd approached her in the parking lot months earlier. "Barbara? It's Rachel Thompson. I need help. Not for me yet, but for a 15-year-old girl who was assaulted at Phoenix Prep. The attacker is Richard Morrison's son." Barbara's response was swift and decisive. "Bring her to New Beginnings immediately. We have a forensic nurse who can document injuries and a lawyer who specializes in cases against privileged predators. Morrison's money doesn't work here." As Joe gathered his children to leave for New Beginnings, Rachel made a decision that would change everything. "I'm coming with you," she announced. "Rachel, no." Joe protested. "If your husband finds out, Mark is in depositions until 6. I have 3 hours," she turned to Sister Catherine. "Can you cover for me?" "Absolutely." Official church business, accompanying a family in crisis for pastoral care. The ride to New Beginnings in Joe's extended cab truck was cramped but somehow comforting. Rachel sat in the back with the younger children while Lily rode up front, still shaking but no longer sobbing. Anna held Rachel's hand while the twins peppered her with questions about whether Lily would be okay. "Your sister is the strongest person I know," Rachel told them. "She's going to be fine. Are you strong too?" Matthew asked with 6-year-old directness. "I'm learning to be." New Beginnings occupied a nondescript building in central Phoenix, designed to be invisible to those who didn't need it and findable for those who did. Barbara Lawson met them at the door, her expression professionally calm, but eyes blazing with anger at Lily's visible injury. "Let's get you documented and safe," she said, leading them inside. While Lily was examined by the forensic nurse, Rachel found herself in a family waiting room with Joe and the other children. David had brought homework, Anna had a book, the twins were coloring, and Matthew had fallen asleep against Joe's shoulder. "Thank you," Joe said quietly, "for thinking clearly when I couldn't. You were protecting your daughter. That's what good fathers do." Emily would have known what to do. She always knew how to navigate systems, find the right people, make things happen. His voice cracked. "I'm failing them, Rachel. I can't be both parents. I can't even be one good parent." "You're wrong." Rachel moved closer, aware of the children, listening despite appearing occupied. "You brought Lily somewhere safe. You're showing your kids that when bad things happen, you don't handle them alone. You're teaching them that asking for help is strength, not weakness. Is that what you're learning too?" Before Rachel could answer, her phone rang. "Mark's ringtone, where are you?" His voice was sharp with suspicion. "At the church. We have a family crisis. A teenager was assaulted, and Sister Catherine asked me to accompany them for pastoral support. You left the church without permission." "I'm doing exactly what you wanted, serving the community in a visible, appropriate way." Pastor Kenneth approved it. Mark was silent for a moment, calculating. "Be home by 6, of course." She hung up to find Joe watching her with an expression of deep concern. "He monitors everything," she said simply. "Rachel, you can't keep living like this." "I don't have a choice." "You do. You could come with us." The words hung in the air like a possibility she couldn't quite grasp. Before she could respond, Barbara returned with Lily, who looked exhausted but somehow stronger. "We've documented everything," Barbara announced. The nurse found defensive wounds suggesting Lily fought back effectively. "We have 3 witnesses who saw Brandon corner her. His family's money won't make this disappear. What happens now?" Joe asked. "Now we file official reports with the school and police. My colleague, attorney Sarah Martinez, will handle Lily's case pro bono. The Morrisons are about to learn that wealth doesn't equal immunity." As they prepared to leave, Barbara pulled Rachel aside. "That offer I made months ago still stands. When you're ready, and you will be ready, we're here." "How do you know I'll be ready?" "Because you came here today. You risked your husband's anger to help this family. That tells me you're already stronger than you think." During the drive back to the church, Lily sat between Rachel and Anna in the back seat, her head resting on Rachel's shoulder. "Miss Rachel," she whispered, "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart. Being scared is normal. Are you scared too?" Rachel thought about the pregnancy test, about Mark's inevitable reaction, about the future that seemed simultaneously hopeful and terrifying. "Every day. But you taught me something important, that we can be scared and brave at the same time." When they reached the church, Rachel had only minutes before she needed to leave for home. But Lily grabbed her hand as she got out of the truck. "Miss Rachel, you know you can't stay with him, especially now." Rachel froze. What do you mean, especially now? Lily's eyes, too wise for 15, met hers directly. You're pregnant, I can tell. My mom looked the same way early on with Matthew. And a baby means you have even more reason to be brave. As Rachel drove home to the house on Desert Willow Drive, Lily's words echoed in her mind. The crisis with the Crow Feather family had shown her something crucial. Systems could be navigated, powerful men could be challenged, and protection existed for those brave enough to seek it. That night, she stood in her bathroom looking at another pregnancy. Test, the third one she'd taken to be sure. All positive. All proof that her body could create life despite the death of her spirit that Mark had tried to orchestrate. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach and made a promise to the cluster of cells growing inside her. I will not let you grow up in fear. I will not let him break you the way he's broken me. I will find the courage to give you better. The crisis test had come not in the form she'd expected, not as Mark's escalating violence, but as Lily's assault, Joe's desperation, and her own pregnancy. She'd passed by choosing action over paralysis, by helping others even when she couldn't yet help herself. Rachel Thompson was still trapped, still afraid, still weeks or months from freedom. But she was no longer alone, no longer without resources, no longer convinced that Mark's power was absolute. The crisis had tested her and found her capable of more than survival. It had found her capable of resistance. October brought unseasonable rain to Phoenix, the kind of persistent drizzle that transformed the desert into something unexpectedly green. Rachel stood at the kitchen window watching water stream down the glass, her hand resting on her stomach where, at 10 weeks, the slightest curve had begun to show. Mark hadn't noticed yet. He rarely looked at her body anymore, except to catalog flaws, but she knew time was running out. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m. Mark was at his office. Wouldn't be home until after 8 according to his calendar. Through the peephole, she saw Joe Crow Feather standing in the rain, no pretense of landscaping equipment this time. This is dangerous, she said, opening the door but not inviting him in. Lily's case against Brandon Morrison is moving forward, he said. His family is threatening to countersue for defamation. I need your help. I can't. Rachel, please. You know how these people operate. You understand their world. My lawyer is good, but she doesn't know the social dynamics, the pressure points, the way these families protect each other. Rachel glanced at the street empty, except for rain and the persistent desert birds that seemed immune to weather. Come in. Quickly. Joe entered, water dripping from his jacket onto the marble floor Mark had selected for its ability to show every imperfection. In the living room, he seemed to fill the space differently than Mark did, not with dominance, but with presence, solid and real in a house that felt like a museum. Tell me everything, Rachel said. Joe explained how the Morrisons had hired a team of lawyers, how they were painting Lily as troubled, aggressive, a scholarship student who didn't belong at Phoenix Prep. They'd found her mother's death certificate, were suggesting grief had made her unstable, that she'd fabricated the assault for attention. That's their playbook, Rachel said, recognizing the strategy. Destroy the victim's credibility, make the case so painful that fighting becomes worse than accepting defeat. Mark has done it dozens of times. How do I protect her? Rachel found herself pulling out a legal pad, sketching diagrams of Phoenix's social hierarchy she'd learned through 8 years of strategic dinner parties. Richard Morrison's weakness is his other son, Michael. He's at ASU, has 2 DUI arrests that were made to disappear. Brandon learned his behavior somewhere. Check Michael's college for sealed complaints. Also, Morrison Development is bidding for the new municipal complex contract. City council votes next month. 3 council members have daughters. Make sure they know what Brandon did to Lily. Joe stared at her with something like awe. You understand this world completely. I've been studying it from the inside like an anthropologist in hell. She paused, meeting his eyes. Joe, there's something else. The Morrison family uses Brennan, Fitzgerald, and Associates for their corporate work. Mark is Richard Morrison's golf partner. Then Mark knows about Lily's case? He will soon. And when he finds out I've been helping you. She couldn't finish the thought. Joe moved closer. Not touching but near enough that she could smell rain and cedar on his clothes. Come with me, right now. Pack what you can, get in my truck. My sister's in Flagstaff, you could stay there until I can't. Why? Rachel stood and lifted her shirt just enough to show the subtle swell of her pregnancy. Because he'll never stop hunting me if I take his child. He'll use every connection, every resource, every legal maneuver to destroy me and get custody. I need more time to prepare, to document, to build a case he can't demolish. Joe's expression cycled through surprise, concern, and something deeper. The baby, is that why you've seemed different, stronger? I can't be the woman who whispers to mirrors anymore. This child deserves a mother who fights, not one who surrenders. You deserve that too, not just the baby. They stood facing each other in Mark's perfectly appointed living room. Two damaged people recognizing something essential in each other. Rachel saw in Joe a man who'd lost everything but kept loving, kept protecting, kept believing in tomorrow. Joe saw in Rachel a woman discovering her strength in the midst of systematic destruction. I should go, Joe said, but didn't move. Yes. Rachel agreed, but stepped closer instead of away. The kiss was inevitable and impossible. Soft and desperate, a moment of connection in lives defined by isolation. Rachel pulled back first, her hand against his chest. We can't, it's too dangerous, I know. Joe's voice was rough with emotion. But Rachel, I need you to know something. Emily's been gone 18 months. I thought I'd never feel anything again, except responsibility and exhaustion. Then you crashed into my cart at the grocery store, looking like you were drowning in broad daylight, and something in me woke up. Joe, I'm not asking you to leave him for me. I'm asking you to leave him for you. But when you do, if you do, we'll be waiting. All 7 of us. The kids adore you, and he stopped, swallowing hard. I could love you, given the chance. Before Rachel could respond, her phone buzzed with a security alert. The driveway camera had activated Mark's Audi 4 hours early. Back door. Now, she grabbed Joe's arm, pulling him through the kitchen. Cut through the Delgado's yard to the next street. Your truck? Parked 2 blocks over. I walked. Go now. Joe paused at the door. Rachel, go. She watched him disappear into the rain, then quickly mopped the water from the entrance, straightened cushions, and positioned herself at the kitchen island with her laptop, pulling up charity donation sites as Mark entered through the garage. You're home early, she said, forcing calm into her voice. The Morrison meeting was postponed. He studied her with prosecutor's eyes. You seem flushed. Hot flash. Dr. Harrison says it's perimenopause symptoms. Mark's expression shifted to disgust. Wonderful. As if your barren womb wasn't enough, now you're menopausal at 37. Rachel bit her tongue, the secret of her pregnancy burning like acid. Let him believe she was aging out of fertility. It made her less valuable in his eyes, which meant less scrutiny. I'll make dinner, she offered. Don't bother. I'm meeting Morrison at the club. Apparently, some scholarship brat at Phoenix Prep is trying to extort his son. We're strategizing responses, Rachel's stomach churned. That sounds complicated. Not really. The girl's a nobody. Father's a landscaper, mother's dead, families barely keeping their heads above water. A few strategic pressures, and they'll drop the case. What kind of pressures? Mark smiled, the cold expression that preceded his worst cruelties. The father owns a landscaping business. One call to immigration services about his workers' documentation. A health department complaint about chemical storage. Maybe a suggestion to Phoenix Prep that their scholarship student is unstable. Problems have a way of multiplying for people who don't know their place. Rachel felt rage building in her chest, hot and powerful. What if the girl is telling the truth? Irrelevant. Morrison is a client. His son's future matters more than some nobody's sob story. He moved closer, his hand gripping her chin. You seem very interested in this situation. Any particular reason? Just trying to understand your work better. Be a more supportive wife. He studied her for a long moment, then released her with a slight push. Don't hurt yourself thinking too hard. After he left, Rachel grabbed her phone and typed a message to Barbara Lawson. Morrison hiring Mark Thompson. Planning to destroy Joe's business, threaten immigration, health department. Need help now. Barbara's response was immediate. On it. We have connections too. That evening, while Mark strategized with Richard Morrison at the country club, Rachel sat in her car in a McDonald's parking lot on a conference call with Barbara Lawson, Sarah Martinez, the attorney handling Lily's case, and surprisingly, Pastor Kenneth. Mark doesn't know the church has been documenting everything, Pastor Kenneth explained. Every time he calls to check on you, I record it. His controlling behavior, his threats disguised as concern, his attempts to isolate you. It's all admissible. And I've been building a different kind of case, Sarah Martinez added. 3 of Mark's former clients' ex-wives have agreed to testify about his methods, how he helped their husbands hide assets, manipulate custody agreements, and destroy their credibility. We're creating a protection network, Barbara said. When you're ready to leave, and that time is coming soon, you won't be alone. Joe's business is already protected. We have immigration lawyers confirming all his workers' documentation, health department officials who'll fast-track clean inspections. Rachel felt tears streaming down her face. Why are you all doing this? Because that's what community means. Pastor Kenneth said simply, we protect each other. Mark Thompson has forgotten that law without compassion is just tyranny. He's about to learn that his power has limits. When Rachel returned home, she found Mark already there, drunk and furious. Morrison's son was arrested, he snarled. That little bitch had a rape kit done, had witnesses, had a fucking legal team that came out of nowhere. Where does a landscaper get that kind of help? Rachel kept her expression neutral. Maybe people are tired of the Morrisons buying their way out of consequences. The slap was hard enough to knock her into the wall. Rachel tasted blood, felt her vision blur, but also felt something else, determination crystallizing into decision. You're defending them, Mark accused. The landscaper and his brat, you've been helping them. You're paranoid, am I? He grabbed her phone, scrolling through it. But Rachel had learned, had deleted everything, had created false trails of shopping sites and recipe blogs. Finding nothing, he threw the phone against the wall, shattering it completely. You're hiding something, I can feel it. The only thing I'm hiding, Rachel said quietly, is how much I've grown to hate you. The words hung between them like a lit fuse. Mark's face went from red to white, his hands clenching and unclenching. Rachel braced for violence, but instead, he smiled, the terrifying expression that meant he was planning something worse than physical pain. Hate me all you want, he said. But remember, without me, you're nothing. No money, no home, no future. A barren, used-up woman no one else would want. After he went to bed, Rachel sat in the dark living room, her hand on her stomach where their child grew in secret. She thought about Joe's kiss, about his offer of love despite her damage. She thought about Lily's courage in facing the Morrisons. She thought about the network of people ready to help her escape. The intersection had arrived, the moment when staying became more dangerous than leaving, when the fear of what Mark might do was eclipsed by the certainty of what he would do. If she stayed, tomorrow she would go to the church as usual. But this time she would not come home. The rain had stopped, leaving the desert washed clean and ready for new growth. Rachel Thompson was ready to stop being Mark's victim and start being her child's protector. Ready to stop whispering to mirrors and start speaking truth to power. Ready to discover if Joe Crowfeather's love could help heal what Mark Thompson's cruelty had broken. The intersection of her old life and new had finally arrived. And she was choosing the path that led away from fear and towards something that might eventually look like hope. That the morning Rachel Thompson didn't come home started like any other. Mark left at 7:15 for racquetball with Judge Harrison, expecting his protein shake prepared and his gym bag packed with the precise items he required. Rachel stood at the door with both, accepting his perfunctory kiss on the cheek that felt more like a brand of ownership than affection. "Dinner at 7, he instructed. "The Weatherbys are coming. Patricia is finally getting divorced, once. My advice, try to look presentable and sympathetic." "Of course," Rachel replied, knowing she'd never cook that dinner, never wear the dress he'd laid out, never again pretend sympathy while secretly recognizing another woman trapped in Mark's web of legal manipulation. She watched his Audi disappear, counted to 100 as always, then walked calmly to the bedroom closet. Behind the designer handbags he'd bought to display his success, she retrieved a small duffel bag she'd hidden weeks ago. Inside, copies of crucial documents, the cash she'd been skimming from grocery money for months, the prenatal vitamins she'd been taking in secret, and a cheap prepaid phone Barbara Lawson had given her. The documentation she'd gathered filled a separate bag, photos of injuries, recorded conversations where legal admissibility met Arizona's one-party consent laws, bank statements showing Mark's hidden accounts that he'd accessed from their home computer, thinking her too stupid to check browser history. Most damning was the video from their home security system footage Mark didn't know she could access, showing him striking her, destroying property, making threats that stripped away his cultivated public facade. At 8 a.m., she drove to St. Augustine's Community Center as usual. But instead of parking in her regular spot, she continued to the back entrance where Sister Catherine waited with Barbara Lawson and Sarah Martinez. "Are you ready?" Sister Catherine asked. "No," Rachel admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." They moved quickly. Rachel's car would be left at the church, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Barbara's unmarked sedan would take her to a safe house, not a shelter where Mark might look, but a private home owned by a network member, a place that didn't exist in any database Mark could access. "Your phone?" Barbara asked. Rachel handed over her regular iPhone, watching Barbara remove the SIM card and battery before placing it in a signal-blocking bag. "Mark is tracking on everything. We know, from this moment, Rachel Thompson takes a sabbatical. You're Rebecca Matthews now." Sarah handed her a folder containing a new driver's license, legally obtained through a judge who understood domestic violence and fast-tracked the name protection order. "How is this legal?" "Emergency protective custody provisions. Judge Chun signed off this morning. Mark's about to learn that he's not the only one who understands the law." The safe house was in Tempe, a modest ranch home in a neighborhood of similar houses where anonymity came easy. The owner, Dr. Patricia Holt, was a retired physician who'd lost her own daughter to domestic violence 20 years ago and had been helping women escape ever since. "You can stay as long as needed," Patricia said, showing Rachel to a bedroom that had housed dozens of women in transition. "The rules are simple. No contact with anyone from your old life except through Barbara. No social media, no going out alone for the first week. After that, we'll assess." Rachel spent that first day in a surreal haze, waiting for Mark to somehow appear, to drag her back to the house on Desert Willow Drive. The prepaid phone remained silent except for periodic check-ins from Barbara. At 3 p.m., it finally rang with the call she'd been dreading and anticipating. "He knows," Barbara said simply. "Came home for lunch, found you gone. He's already called the police, claiming you're mentally unstable and possibly suicidal. What do I do?" "Nothing." Sarah's handling it. She's at the police station now with your documentation. By the time Mark realizes you're not a missing person, but a woman who left, the narrative will already be established. That evening, while Rachel sat in Patricia's living room, learning to breathe without fear, Mark Thompson was discovering that his carefully constructed world had cracks he'd never noticed. Sarah Martinez had filed for an emergency restraining order, supported by evidence that made Mark's denials impossible. The police, initially sympathetic to a concerned husband, changed their approach when shown video of Mark striking Rachel, screenshots of threatening texts, medical records documenting repeated injuries. But the true masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Richard Morrison, facing his son's conviction for assault, had decided Mark Thompson was a liability. He'd provided Sarah Martinez with recordings of Mark discussing how to hide assets from the Barren bitch when I finally dump her conversations. That revealed Mark had been planning to divorce Rachel once he found a younger, fertile replacement, but wanted to ensure she got nothing in the settlement. "He never loved me at all," Rachel said when Barbara delivered this news. "No, honey," Barbara replied gently. "Men like Mark don't love. They acquire, they control, they possess, but they don't love." 3 days into her stay at the safe house, Rachel received an unexpected visitor. Joe Crow Feather stood at the door. With Patricia's permission, looking haggard but hopeful. "I had to see you," he said, "to know you were really safe." They sat on the back patio, a respectful distance apart, but connected by something deeper than physical proximity. "How are the kids? Worried about you. Anna keeps asking when Miss Rachel is coming back to tutoring. Lily wants to know if you're okay, if you need anything. Even the twins made you get well cards, though I didn't tell them you were sick." Rachel touched her stomach where, at 11 weeks, the pregnancy was becoming harder to hide. "Joe, there's something you need to know. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Lily figured it out weeks ago. She has a sense about these things. It's Mark's baby. He doesn't know yet, but when he finds out, he'll use it as a weapon." "I know." Joe moved closer, his hand covering hers. "But Rachel, that baby is yours. You're the one growing it, nurturing it, protecting it. Mark contributed. DNA, you're contributing everything else. I don't know how to do this alone. You're not alone. You have Barbara, Sarah, Sister Catherine, Pastor Kenneth, Patricia. And if you'll let us, you have me and 6 kids who think you're pretty amazing." Rachel looked at this man who'd lost his wife to cancer, who was raising 6 children alone, who'd seen her at her most broken and still offered unconditional support. "I'm scared I'll never be normal again. That Mark broke something in me that can't be fixed. Emily used to say that broken bones heal stronger at the breakpoint," Joe said. "Maybe broken hearts do too. Maybe the cracks are where the light gets in." Over the following weeks, Rachel's new life began taking shape. Sarah Martinez handled the legal battle with strategic brilliance, using Mark's own tactics against him. The prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on meant to leave Rachel with nothing had a clause about infidelity that Sarah proved applied to Mark's emotional affair with his paralegal. The hidden assets he'd accumulated became marital property subject to division. His threats and violence triggered not just a restraining order but criminal charges. Meanwhile, Rachel began building something new. She started teaching at the safe house, helping other women prepare for GED exams and job interviews. Her teaching certification, dormant for 8 years, was reinstated. Phoenix Prep, in a gesture of cosmic justice, offered her a position teaching elementary English, the job funded partially by an anonymous donation from the Morrison family, desperate to rehabilitate their image after Brandon's conviction. Custody battle Mark threatened never materialized. When he learned about the pregnancy through his lawyer, as the restraining order prevented direct contact, his response was predictable and revealing. He demanded a paternity test, convinced Rachel had cheated, unable to believe he'd fathered a child after years of blaming her for their infertility. When the test confirmed his paternity, he made a calculated decision. A baby would interfere with his image as Phoenix's most eligible bachelor, the narrative he'd already begun crafting. He signed away parental rights in exchange for Rachel, dropping any claim to alimony. "He's giving up his child for money," Rachel said, staring at the legal documents. "He's giving you freedom," Sarah corrected. "Take it." On a warm December morning, 6 months after that first collision in the grocery store, Rachel stood in a courtroom as her divorce was finalized. Mark wasn't present. His lawyer handled everything, as if she were a business transaction being concluded. She signed the papers as Rachel Thompson one last time, then walked out as Rachel Matthews. Legally free. Joe was waiting outside the courthouse with all 6 kids. They'd made a banner that read "Happy Freedom Day" in uneven letters, decorated with drawings of flowers and butterflies, and what appeared to be a dragon, Matthew's contribution. "We thought you might want to celebrate," Joe said. "With ice cream," Matthew shouted. "Dad says ice cream makes everything better." "Ice cream sounds perfect," Rachel agreed. Letting Anna and Lily pull her toward Joe's truck, they went to a place called Sweet Republic, where the kids argued over flavors and toppings, while Joe and Rachel sat close enough that their shoulders touched. She was showing now, 5 months pregnant, the bump visible beneath her sundress, a dress she'd chosen herself in a color Mark would have hated. "I have something to tell you," Lily announced, standing formally as if giving a presentation. "I've been accepted to the summer medical program at ASU full scholarship. They said my essay about watching Mom fight cancer and seeing Miss Rachel fight for freedom showed unusual maturity and understanding of medical ethics." Rachel felt tears falling. Freely happy tears, proud tears, the kind Mark had never permitted. "Lily, that's incredible. You helped me write that essay," Lily said. "You taught me that survival stories matter, that pain can become purpose." To Miss Rachel. David raised his ice cream cone in a toast. "For being brave and helping our family." To Miss Rachel. The other children echoed, even little Matthew, who wasn't entirely sure what they were celebrating, but knew it was important. 4 months later, on a bright April morning, Rachel gave birth to a daughter. She named her Emily Hope Matthews, Emily, for Joe's late wife, whose strength had inspired a family to keep going. Hope for what Rachel had found when she thought all was lost. Matthews for the new identity that had given her freedom. Joe was there. Not as her partner, they were taking that slowly, carefully, with full awareness of their respective healing needs, but as her friend, her support. The man who'd seen her drowning and thrown her a lifeline disguised as a business card. The Crow. Feather children came to visit that afternoon, crowding into the hospital room with handmade cards and stuffed animals they'd pooled their allowances to buy. "She's so tiny," Sarah whispered, staring at the baby with wonder. "Can we be her big siblings?" Samuel asked. "Even though we're not really related?" Rachel looked at Joe, who was holding her daughter with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 6 times before, his eyes soft with emotion. "Family isn't always about blood," Rachel said. "Sometimes it's about choosing to love each other." "Then we choose you," Anna declared with 10-year-old certainty. "Both of you. All of us together." A year later, Rachel stood in the backyard of a house in Chandler, not as grand as the one on Desert Willow Drive, but filled with something more valuable than marble floors and infinity pools. It was filled with life, with chaos, with love that didn't demand perfection. She and Joe had married quietly at the courthouse, with their 7 children as witnesses. Not because she needed a husband, she'd learned she was complete on her own, but because she'd chosen a partner who understood that love meant supporting each other's healing, not demanding the other person be whole. Mark Thompson had remarried, too, to a 23-year-old Instagram influencer who'd lasted 6 months before filing for divorce, citing emotional abuse. He'd been disbarred after 3 more ex-wives of his clients came forward with evidence of his illegal tactics. The last Rachel heard, he was living in California, selling real estate. His reputation in Phoenix thoroughly destroyed. But Rachel didn't think about Mark much anymore. She was too busy teaching 3rd graders who reminded her why she'd become an educator, raising a daughter who laughed freely and often, loving a man who'd shown her that widowers and abuse survivors could build something beautiful from their broken pieces, and helping 6 children navigate life with grace and humor. On quiet evenings, when the kids were asleep and Joe was reading in his chair, Rachel sometimes stood in their bathroom mirror hole, uncracked, reflecting a woman who'd forgotten she had wings until circumstances forced her to fly. She no longer whispered to her reflection about being too broken to love. Instead, she smiled at the woman looking back, scarred but strong, healing but whole, proof that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the most painful circumstances. The Cherokee man with 6 kids hadn't just rescued her from a violent marriage. He'd shown her that rescue was something she could do for herself, that love wasn't about finding someone to save you, but finding someone to heal alongside, that families could be built from fragments and still be complete. Rachel Matthews, formerly Thompson, teacher, mother, survivor, and thriver, had learned the most important lesson of all. Being broken didn't disqualify you from love. Sometimes it was the exact qualification needed to love deeply, fully, with the kind of gratitude that only comes from knowing what it feels like to nearly disappear and choosing instead to bloom. In the desert outside Phoenix, where rain was rare but transformative when it came, Rachel had discovered that the most unlikely ground could nurture the most resilient growth. She'd been the barren wife, beaten daily, convinced she deserved nothing more. But with the help of a lonely Cherokee man who understood that grief and grace could coexist, she'd become something else entirely. A woman who knew that love wasn't about being perfect, but about being present. That strength wasn't about being unbreakable, but about choosing to rebuild. And that sometimes the best families were the ones you chose when the ones you were given had failed. The bruises had faded, the fear had lifted. The mirror no longer showed a fractured woman whispering about being too broken to love. Instead, it reflected someone who'd learned that broken people could create the most beautiful mosaics, that love could grow in the most unlikely soil, and that sometimes rescue came not from a knight in shining armor, but from a landscaper in a dusty truck who knew that helping beautiful things grow in difficult conditions was both a business motto and a life philosophy. Emily Hope Matthews grew up surrounded by 6 older siblings who'd chosen her, a mother who'd fought for her before she was even born, and a father who'd proved that love wasn't limited by biology, but expanded by choice. She would never know the fear her mother had whispered to mirrors, would never understand that her existence had been the catalyst for the bravest escape ever orchestrated. She would simply know that she was loved fiercely and completely by a family that had been assembled from broken pieces into something stronger than what had come before. And in the end, that was the greatest transformation of all. Not just that Rachel had escaped, not just that she'd survived, but that she'd built something beautiful from the ruins Mark Thompson had left behind. She'd taken a violent marriage, a barren womb that wasn't actually barren, and a chance encounter in a grocery store, and she'd transformed them into a love story that proved sometimes the best endings come from the worst beginnings. The woman who'd once believed she was too broken to love now knew the truth. Everyone was broken in some way. The lucky ones found other broken people who fit their jagged edges, who understood that scars were proof of survival, not evidence of damage. And together, these broken people could create something whole, something healed, something that looked exactly like hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.